Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 899, Richard and Gary here, and we've got lots to talk about. We've got some new builds of Windows 11 to talk about and what these branch changes mean. I've got a bit of music news, music tech news, I should say, AI based. Looking at what this is. We've got some EV news from Garry went to Fully Charged Live, and Richard's been out in his vehicles, and peripherals, and lots more. So let's get straight to Richard and Garry. Richard, Garry, good evening.
Good evening.
And how do we enjoy our bank holiday weekend?
Very, very good. Busy one for me on EVs and other vehicles.
Yeah, and Richard, you went on a trip.
And I was enjoying the delight that is the electric charging infrastructure in the UK, which is such a joy.
Well, we talk about that. We have got some builds to talk about. I've got another piece of music equipment that I've look back on, my Korg KARMA, and a couple of videos. Before I start though, I did dig out this. I remember these.
Yes, I've got one of those in there.
Yes. Oh, goodness me, look at that.
Yeah,
I have a few of those lying around.
That's magnificent. And does it still work?
It still works. Acer Aspire 1, the battery's gone on it. So it doesn't work without the battery, although I suppose it has got a replaceable battery and no obsolescence in these things.
It's funny showing that, because I'm currently looking for a new Ultrabook, because I did try and do a conference just using my iPad, and I realized that no, you need a laptop. It just doesn't work. So I need.
I'll do you a deal.
I don't want I do not want an Acer Aspire. Thank you, Ian.
It runs Vista.
Even better. I mean, you're really sweetening the pill there. Right? It runs Vista as well. Yeah, well, good.
Yeah, okay.
It's a Vista Media Center.
It will run Vista Media Center. I pulled this out of the loft, and it had Windows 8.1 Pro Beta on here with the beta fish. So and the date and time were 2013 on it, so I guess it hasn't updated. That's probably the last time I used it. But anyway, I wiped it, and I thought I'm going to go for the high end and go for Vista Home Premium. So that's what's that's what's on this now. No drivers, of course. So I've got to sort all that out. But
it's Windows 8. Would it take Windows 10?
It would take Windows 10. It won't take Windows 11, sadly, because it's 32-bit only. It will take Windows 10 though, so that's my next job, to see if I can get Windows 10 on it.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can upgrade Vista to Windows 10 in place. Why not? Well, again, I was showing this, and the only reason I got this out because I was showing my apprentice at work, and he thought, that'd be cool if you could buy one of them. I said, well, you could 10 years ago or whatever it was. Somewhere I've got my what were the original ones called? The Linux Acer ones. Were they Asus EPC?
EPC, yeah.
The EPC. That was even the form factor, the category name for a little while, wasn't it? Until Netbook came along.
I mean, I think that's kind of one of the things that really sort of freaked out Microsoft. What wasn't it when they did the cut down versions of Windows, when these netbooks running Linux began to become popular, and there was this almost like a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, I mean, the EPC was Linux, wasn't it? That when that shipped, and I actually bought one of them off eBay and hacked Windows XP onto it, but it wasn't easy. I think did they have 512 meg of RAM? I think they would have done, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they were certainly low spec.
This has got a whole gig on it.
Yeah. Interesting, because they're really underpowered for the Windows of the day, but they probably work pretty well with Windows.
Yeah, they probably will. I mean, this one's got a gig of RAM and a 128 gig drive. I think it won't be SSD, but it's chunky though. That's what the apprentice at the work, he couldn't get over how chunky it was. But still, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, just look back at earlier versions of Windows, like NT3551. That could run on 12 megabytes. So
yeah,
and you think, okay, I'm not 100% sure exactly how things have improved so much that the requirements have got so massive now. Because again, as I said, I'm looking at a Ultrabook and thinking, probably need to make sure it's got 16 gigs at least. I think, wow, really, how times have changed.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the Windows 11 is 8 gig of RAM, isn't it? I think, or is it 4? Is it still 4?
I think it's. Oh, was it 8 now?
I think it's 8, isn't it? Oh no, 4 it is, because I've been building the VMs and it's always that's where I have to put it up to. Yeah, but I have heard that Windows 12
it'll run in 3 gigs on a Pi won't it? So
yeah, I have heard that whatever the next version of Windows is will be up to 8. But which, it's I mean, most machines didn't have a hard drive that size a few years ago. Never mind RAM.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the hardware requirements of Windows 11 are just frankly barking mad, bearing in mind what it is. So yeah, I guess we'll see what the Windows 11 point whatever or 12 or whatever, if they give it some weird name like Windows Sunrise. I've no idea what they're going to call it.
Oh, Windows Sunrise. There we go. That's the name. put it in the pool.
I don't know. I mean, all I do know is, I was actually looking at support dates because I'm obviously still running Windows 10 on most of my gear here, and it's I mean, I'm obviously very late in the game here, but of course I hadn't realised that 22H2 is the last version of Windows 10. That's it. There's no more.
Yeah.
It's just patches now, isn't it? Forevermore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And
yeah,
when I say forevermore, it's I think it's is it October 2025 when it finally retires? Although obviously you've got a long-term an LTSC version, then who knows? But yeah, that's quite a lot actually. I hadn't fully.
I quite like Windows Sunrise as a name. I'm just sitting there thinking the marketing slogans: "A new dawn for Windows."
Yeah.
Look, I just want to point out I made that up. No,
it's good by that.
Yeah, it has got a bit of Vista type of connotation, hasn't it, as well? So I think it plays into it as I'm doing all my as we're going back to Vista now. So yeah, I agree.
Just look and see if WindowsSunrise.com has been registered by anyone, and if not, grab it now.
Yes. By the time you listen to this, it'll be too late. But so in terms of a new device, Richard, what you're looking at?
Well, I mean, it's come to the point where really it's portability, because I mean, one thing I did like about the iPad was the fact it was incredibly portable. Being quite an old person now, I don't want to have a big hefty laptop bag. Just something very lightweight. I had an XPS 13, which is still going strong, but it's been handed down now to another member of the family. So I'm in the market for a new one, and I'm looking around. I mean, there's a lot of things that Microsoft do. I was even looking for a while at the MacBook Air, but it seems very expensive compared to the Intel or Windows AMD alternative. So yeah, just something that's very, very lightweight that I can plug some USB devices into, because that's actually the showstopper with the iPad, that I can't plug in any USB devices. That's a problem.
So have you looked at the last surviving UMPC, the GPD micro PC?
I've not heard of that. Tell me more.
So I've got one of these, an older model, but it basically is it is a full-blown laptop in a case the size of an old UMPC, 6-inch screen, I believe.
Ooh,
well,
it's a bit small for old eyes.
Let's see if I can find it. Oh, yeah, there you go. I've got an eBay link for one. Let me.
I've got the Amazon one. I'll yeah. Is that the one with 256?
I'm thinking more of like a 13 or 14 screen, if I'm honest. But
you can always get one of those extension screens to go on it.
I could do. I do have an over external screen, which is brilliant.
Is this one you?
That's quite a
the one I've just wanted is 450 quid with 512 gig on it. But
it's got 8 gigs of memory, and I'm sorry, that's.
Oh,
they do
almost £1,000. Wow.
Yeah. But I mean, the one I've got works really well for the occasional use. I have actually used it for doing talks.
Yeah, I think that one I'm going to probably have to pass on. It's that's a ridiculous amount.
Because it's got a Celeron N in it as well.
Celeron N. Yeah. But it's an impressive bit of tech, I have to say.
Yeah, the little trackpad on there, I quite like that.
The one I've just placed in the link actually runs Windows 11. So yeah.
Wow.
I'll get that one.
Well, I'm quite intrigued in that, because the problem is it's not so much finding one. There's so many around the same kind of sort of 750, £800 price mark.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Edition
and
used. No, that's fine.
there's quite a few things at that price. I suppose something like the Surface Go is too small and underpowered for what you need.
Yeah, I think so. And also the Surface Laptop Go as well. I mean, I was looking at the Surface Laptop, but they're quite expensive. And again, I mean, a lot of those Microsoft tools are due a refresh anyway, because
Yeah, the Surface Laptop Go, my wife really loves that, and that's her only device. But she really, that's the best machine she's had that, so she really likes that. And for me, this laptop studio has been brilliant, especially doing all the Hyper-V stuff. It's got enough space and RAM. I do like this, but maybe it's a bit heavier than you want, but it's a really nice. I mean, it's probably the most expensive device I've had, and it's also the nicest one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking really at around the 1 kilo mark, really, if I'm honest.
I don't know what this is actually, but maybe but you're paying a premium for the surfaces, aren't you?
You are, and the surfaces. I mean, they do appeal, but certainly, I mean, I was looking very hard at the Surface laptops. I don't really want a Surface Pro because I've never really got. It's got to work in my lap, and you know, the Surface Pro form factor with the clip-on keyboard doesn't really work, and that's also an issue with the iPad as well, if I'm honest. So I think the Surface laptop is probably a little underpowered, and the Surface laptop itself it's expensive, and two, it's feeling like it needs a refresh. If I'm honest.
I think the laptop studio you would like. It just depends on whether it's just a bit too big for you, but
yeah.
I
mean, one thing that really appealed to me was there was a Dell XPS 15 that's quite large, and that's got a GeForce 4770 in it for the one time I play games every few years. So,
yeah,
but when I saw the price was probably more than my car costs, I thought, you know what, I'm going to probably pass on that one.
Yeah. It's just a question of going on play. I can't. I'll try.
So the version of that GPT Pocket 3 with a Core i7 16 gigs and a terabyte SSD.
No.
How much?
2,500 quid.
Whoa,
that's quite a lot of money for.
Because of a pen.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it does look very cool, but that's quite a lot of money for what that is.
Well, yeah, it's dearer than the laptop studio. So,
The laptop series, that's very tempting. Yeah, it is very tempting, but equally so is a MacBook Air as well, even though it involves using Mac OS, which is not my favorite operating system in the world, if I'm honest.
And of course, with the laptop studio, you can make it into tablet mode, which I don't use it all the time, but I do use it occasionally. Especially with the pen, I do it for note taking. So I do use that. It's not like I never use that feature. Whereas
I'm not sure how much I would use it to touch screen, because I know my old Dell had a touch screen, which I ended up really only using it when I was scrolling through web pages. So I had a bit of some smear on one side.
Yeah. There are a lot of nice options for Windows though. Definitely.
There's loads out there. I mean, Asus and Acer do some really nice looking machines actually. So it's really tricky. And as I said, I was initially very tempted by the Apple device until I saw the price and thought, yeah, you know what, that's a lot of money for.
It is. But if you've had them before and you can live with Mac OS, then it's not a bad option, is it? I mean, yeah. I
mean, I run a Mac Mini M1, which has been very, very good, much better than the Windows ARM Dev Kit, which has been not so good in a similar form factor. So I was tempted, but I think I'm just very, very used to using Windows, and it is always a wrench to switch to Mac OS. The other thing as well is, of course, I mean, you know, a lot of these laptops, it's very easy to blast Linux on them, which I'm also quite familiar with, you know, some of the Linux desktops as well. Whereas with a MacBook Air, it's very hard to get anything but Mac OS on. I mean, there are some distributions coming, but they're still I would say, at a very alpha stage at the moment. And even then, you know, it's quite clear that Apple does not want you to do this. So.
Yeah. Well, let us know how you get on. So
I'm going to make a decision next few days, so I'll let you know what happens.
Yeah, I think I want to see one of those little things. But if you do want Vista and an Acer Aspire one, let me know. I'll do you a good deal.
I would not want to deprive you of your collection of tat. And just think, in 10 years' time, that might be worse. Sometimes do, you know?
Yeah, well, there is this thing, isn't it? Now, you reach a certain age, and the things that you've kept hold of that you couldn't be bothered getting rid of are actually now become valuable again. The value's dipped and going back up again. It's really strange. That's with some of the music tech, the keyboard that I did last week, the Korg KARMA one. It kind of went to like no value really for a while, and it's starting to pick back up now. And the Reverb website, which is like eBay for music equipment, they do like a tracker of a graph of the prices, and I think it's across the board pretty much on old synths, but the resale value is going up and up. So keep them long enough, it'd be worth something, I'm sure. But so I did do another video of that keyboard last week. So this is quite a clever one, this Korg KARMA one, because it's a Korg workstation from 2001, but it's got some. It's not quite AI, but it's not far off. They call it GE's General Effects, but it uses something called KARMA, which is K algorithmic something. Stephen K created it, and it's a way really of coming up with patterns based on the notes you're playing. So it's kind of AI. It stands for K's algorithmic real-time music architecture. So nowadays they call it music. They call it an AI system, but in 2001 they didn't. But so depending on what you play, it can adjust and create these. So if you play like there's a harp one that simulates the fact that the strings are different positions on the harp and that kind of thing. It's quite an interesting device, but it kind of went a little bit out of fashion. But since I posted the video, loads of people say, "Oh, that's great! I've forgotten about mine, or I got rid of mine. I wish I kept it." So it's not helping now, because I was thinking of documenting these things and clearing out some space for new stuff, but when I started playing with them, I think, oh, I quite like this, so I'm going to keep it. So it's not really helping. But yes, and funny, the expansion on it, which I'll show you. Also, this one has an expansion card, which is going to be my next video. But I think if I share the pictures of them, these look like memory DIMMs. Are they? Would you SODIMM chips? Or
I do look like SODIMMs, yeah.
Yeah, I think they pretty much are. We just obviously, instead of it being RAM chips, they're ROM chips on there, because these are just ROMs with extra sound sets. So I think each one of these cards is 16 meg. So these are effectively 16 meg RAM chips, I think, but just soldered with a ROM chip. But it's quite interesting. It looks like a PC architecture in there, so that you just lift the cover and slide that in. So, yeah. So anyway, so that video is on there. So old technology being brought to life again, but only 2001. But in music tech terms, that's not too bad. In PC terms, it's quite a long time, isn't it? But music tech, I mean, some of the other stuff I'm still using is go back to the 80s. But yeah. So I don't think I've got any more PCs. I think I've got my EPC somewhere. That's the last thing I think I'll try and dig out and see if I can get recovered, get working.
Yeah, I must admit. I mean, I wish I hadn't gotten rid of my Surface RT. Really,
still got my Surface RT down here. Yeah, Surface RT.
I think
still
mine's
going.
being used as a picture frame now. So
yeah. Look at that, the old keyboards.
Yeah, that's great. Great device.
Yeah. Still like my Surface. They were great devices then. I did another video as well. Anybody interested in USB hubs? Always handy. So I posted a video of those for the Orico 4-port USB hub. It's a little plastic one, which is, some of them are quite big, but this is a nice little plastic one. So with the Surface and the other devices, you can never have too many USB ports nowadays, because they only have a few, don't they? So this has got one of those 4-port type ones.
Well, that's very useful.
Yeah. We also had a couple of Windows builds and videos. We had a Canary build, and
Indeed.
things have changed slightly, not so much on the visual side of it, but on the development branch. Gary, can you explain to us what these development branches are, the nickel and all these different things? Does anybody outside Microsoft understand them?
I have absolutely no idea. I've seen them, but I really have no idea what they're supposed to be. I mean, us developers often have strange naming conventions for things, so it could be anything.
Well, if I remember rightly, so we were on the I think it's like the semesters, they call them, development semesters, where it's a period of time where they're using this base. So it's not particularly tied to the version like 22H2 or whatever, but it can be. But it's the core underneath, isn't it? And we were using on the nickel branch, which manifests itself as the RS pre-release, is how the insider builds. But we've been onto the ZN or ZN release, which I can't remember what's the chemical formula that stands for. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll dig it out, see if I can find what it is. It's
zinc, I think. Zinc.
Yes, yes, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the underlying platform has switched to this this branch, which they do periodically. I remember them doing this last year. They've done it almost every year for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, is this 25352?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of these very annoying blog posts because I mean they basically said we're not going to do any more blog posts anymore unless something's changed. And it's one of these annoying ones where they have sort of vague things in it, like say as a result of this change, insiders will notice that some features have been removed temporarily. What features?
Yes.
Away? Nothing.
Just tell us.
But it's okay because they're going to roll out a new widget experience picker or new picker experience, whatever, for the widgets. Very fantastic. Yeah. Very frustrating. It's like, tell us what's changed. And it's not rocket science.
And it's the underlying core, underlying rather than there's any particular UI stuff. And we have this. I seem to remember we had this last year and the year before for about 2 or 3 months, and then we got back onto pre-release again once they'd finished testing what they needed to test. But I noticed the widget board has been. It's gone back to a previous style. It's gone back to the current shipping build version of it as well. So it looks like that. Yeah, some underlying parts have gone back to the old version. And as you mentioned, there is a new widget picker, but I haven't got that because it's obviously A/B testing. So, but I'm not aware of anybody that's got it yet. So I've seen people sort of saying, "Has anybody got the widgets, the new widget?" And no one has replied and said yes. So there must be a very small group.
Turn it off. No, not using it.
Well, actually, I like in the new builds, the widgets, they've split them so that the news feed is on the right and the widgets are on the left. And if you could get rid of the news feed completely, then it would actually be kind of useful if you had, rather than entertainment and finance and esports or whatever, and it was just your Spotify media controls and maybe your team's status with your team's meeting and your calendar and that kind of thing. If they make it into something a bit more useful, then I think it would get used more. But it costs what hours happens, doesn't it? That they put all this stuff in, there's not that much in it. It doesn't get used that much, so then they deprecate it later. So the people that were using it don't have that. So the cycle of Microsoft trying things out is usually like that, isn't it?
It is really, it's very strange.
So that was it in this build. It was just the one change. But I think we might not see any features for a while until we get back onto pre-release, and then when we do get onto pre-release, maybe they're getting ready to test for a future version of Windows. Then you never know.
It could be, It's we just don't know what's. I mean, it's the legendarily terrible communication that comes out of Microsoft for Windows. Really, it's not good. But as you say, I guess soon we'll find out.
Yeah. Builds in the next month or so, isn't it? Next few weeks, is it?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's true, actually. It's coming down fast, actually.
Yeah, so maybe we'll see something on there. Although they don't traditionally announce like new versions of Windows or anything major like that at one of these events. They'd hold that for a special event, wouldn't they? Where they would Windows 11 was announced at an event which was about the future of Windows. So I'm sure it would be the same again. We did get a beta build as well, but there wasn't a huge amount in that. Just the widget boards. This is what I was talking about with the widget boards. So you've got the useful bits on the left and the less useful bits on the right. And I think, that's what was in there. And there's a bit of animation, but there wasn't a huge amount of changes with these builds, and no dev build at all last week.
Yeah.
So that was the Windows Insider news. Now, I wanted to catch up on some interesting things that you two had last week around EV. So Richard, we'll start with the with yours, and then Gary will come down because I want to ask you about Aston Martin. But yeah,
definitely.
so Richard, you went on your first sort of long trip.
I haven't, yes, I'm sure Gary's going to tell us all about the fully charged show as well. But yes, I took my EV on its first long trip away from home, because in the past I've been able to get to and from the house in one charge, which is always the purpose of the thing. And I'd known I had a few long distance trips coming up, and I was a bit concerned. There was a bit of range anxiety going on, because I knew that I wouldn't be able to get there and back in one go. And so this weekend I went to, well, the car. I didn't go with the car. I was at home watching it nervously on the map, because it was a double test really, because the car was going all the way to North Devon, which is about as far as you can go on a single charge, realistically speaking. And my partner was driving it, which meant she had to operate all the public charging points too. So I was slightly concerned what was going to happen, because she's not the most technical of people, and sometimes it can be difficult. But we didn't have one issue with any charger not working. Once she understood the difference between CCS chargers and Type 2 chargers, you don't ever want to use a Type 2 charger, and it's going to be there for a while. Whereas she had this vision of you park up half an hour, have a cup of tea, plug it in, add 100 miles or so, and then come back. And once she understood that was a CCS charger, that's great. I would say that the problems that were encountered were not to do with operation and payment. That was all fine, and it wasn't actually that expensive. I was prepared for it to be really horribly expensive, and it wasn't actually that bad. Obviously nowhere near as cheap as charging at home, but not that bad. It was more finding an available CCS charger. That was a problem. There were lots and lots and lots of Type 2 chargers out there, no problem at all. A CCS charger, which is a fast or rapid charger, can say pumping a lot more kilowatts or kilowatt hours, sorry, because again, Gary, please correct me here, because you are the expert. But the standard type 2 charger that I've got at home is a 7 kilowatt hour charger, and that can charge my Kia Niro EV, which is about I think it's a 64 kilowatt hour engine, and that it will do that battery rather. It will do that in about, I don't know, 5 hours, 6 hours. That's a Type 2. If you can find a CCS charger, they can be way bigger, like 50 kilowatt hours, 150 kilowatt hours, much. And the Kia, what it won't take the whole, it's not able to take the full load from 150 kilowatt hour charger. Even plugging it into a 50 kilowatt hour charger, it blasted through. It was, you could actually see it ticking up in real time. Very impressive.
Just to correct you slightly, Richard, because I know the opinion there will have a field day on this. So the chargers are actually 50 kilowatt, not kilowatt hours, because they will charge it at full. If you switch it on for an hour, you will get 50 kilowatt hours. Well, you won't quite, because there's some loss either side of it. But if you're only on for half an hour, you only get 25 kilowatt hours because it's 50 kilowatts. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And the other challenge with those chargers is it also depends on the ampage as well, and the voltage they can charge at, and what you can receive. So the architecture on the vehicle plays a lot on this. A lot of the older cars are 200 volt, some of them modern ones with 400 volt, and then mine's an 800 volt. So you can take a faster charge as long as the charger supports it.
Yeah.
So you sometimes see chargers rated at 150 kilowatts, but that's only if you've got 400 volt ability to charge to actually take a 400 volt charge. So it can be even more confusing than that. But yeah, I certainly take your point.
Well, the joy was again, it was very straightforward. Just plugged it in and it simply worked. You didn't really have any awareness of what it was doing. And obviously, as you say, I must have mixed up the terms kilowatt hour and kilowatt. Very important, big difference. Quite a very different measure. The only issue that we actually had, because we used ZapMap in the end to find chargers. That seems to be pretty accurate. The only issue we had was a lack of CCS chargers was one issue, which meant we had to be quite careful and look where we're going to go. But that's all part of EV ownership. You have to plan your journeys. The other thing was pitching up and finding somebody was plugged in already, and there wasn't enough chargers. That happened once, and that was irritating. And I got this panic phone call, and then had to look on Zap Maps where there's some more over there. And obviously, as Garry advised, don't go right to the end of the charge. Start looking at sort of the 50 or 80 mile point. Okay, now we need to find a charger, and there was always one around.
But, I mean, I think that's the thing, that there is always another charger. I mean, I'm actually becoming more and more reliant on the in-car nav for my charger searching. I certainly did that this last weekend, because one of the advantages of that is the connecting navigation, which is on some Kias and on a lot of cars these days. It does have a direct feed from the charge point operator. So for most chargers, certainly the ones that services and things like Shell and Osprey and that, it will tell you if someone's actually on the charger before you get there. And
that's handy.
And at one point of the weekend, I was watching this one particular charger because I decided I was going to do 150 miles and then I was going to charge. And that would give me enough time to get to another charger if I needed to. And I was watching this charger as I went along, and it had 6 charge points, and it was always like 5 occupied, 6 occupied, 5 occupied, 6 occupied, because basically people were queuing to get on it, and it was just cycling around, and then someone came off. But I'd worked out that the last person to get on that charger had been there about 45 minutes before I was going to get there. So even if he was still on there when I got there, he was about to come off because it would have been enough charge. So some just play that sort of game, but yeah. But no, I'm pleased she survived the journey.
There were no problems. There were no problems at all. Used 3 chargers, I think, and made it back with hundreds of miles still in, because one wants to make sure. But I was even very, very impressed. We even charged up at a motorway service station, which I thought would be hideous, and it wasn't that bad. It was about £7 worth. It wasn't hideously expensive. I know it's more than it used to be, but it's still pretty good. So all told, actually, it was quite painless once you'd understood the fact that my takeaway would be there's not enough CCS chargers out there right now. There needs to be a lot more.
There's definitely not enough CCS chargers at the point people would naturally go looking for, like the motorway services. And we've touched on this before now, that there is a problem with getting chargers on the motorway services because they're built in absolutely the worst possible place you'd want to build something to get electricity to it. Normally motorway services are halfway between towns and cities for very good reasons, because that's where you want motorway services.
What's the situation, Garry, with the Tesla superchargers and non-Teslas at the moment?
So Tesla have opened up their network on certain of their chargers to non-Tesla owners. You still have to use their app to actually pay for it, and it does cost you more than if you're a Tesla owner. They are supposed to be opening up a few more. There are a few issues with that, because obviously Tesla chargers are built to charge Teslas. They have very, very short leads in most cases, and they aim for one side of the car, which is the other side of the car to mine. So if I actually was good to use a Tesla supercharger, I'd probably block another charger for somebody else, which I don't want to do. So that's why I haven't used them much. But I think that will change. They've just announced their next generation of charger, which are actually angled differently and the cable would possibly reach most cars. So, and I think they will open up the network for that as well, more so. But I mean, obviously, I spent the weekend commuting to Farnborough, then back to Peterborough, then back to Milton Keynes, and then to Farnborough and back again. So I did a good 400 odd miles over the weekend. And I only stopped when I wanted to stop, and I charged when I stopped. Basically, somehow there was always a free charger. I got quite lucky actually really with that. And most of the charging I actually did overnight on the hotel charger and but what was interesting when I was at Fully Charged, there was a new association launched from the charge point operators. It's called Charge UK, and it's run by a friend of the show, Ian from Osprey, who's been on the show a few times, in Johnson, who is now the chairman of this body, and their aim is to try and get some standardisation and all work together to make sure that locations without chargers get chargers. And part of that is to put pressure on the government to actually open up the energy network so we can get better energy provision at some of these more remote sites, because it's really difficult to get power installed at the moment, because and this is historic. I mean, if you actually think about laying of power cables for commercial use. It was a once in a lifetime thing. It used to happen. You get a big factory built and you might lay a cable for it, and it didn't happen that often. So the energy providers are not set up to do this. They're not set up to put big power lines in loads of places. What's trying to be happening at the moment in terms of getting these charge points out there. So there needs to be some help to get that moving, and some of that will actually be down to recruitment as well. It's difficult to find people to do it as well, because you have to be pretty well qualified to handle some of these big megawatt cables and plug them in. But it will happen. I mean, we're starting to see there were, I think, in the time I actually was traveling last week, there was 32 new chargers installed in the country, and some of those are actually down in Devon. So there are more coming. There's Osprey have just put in a planning permission application for a field near me on the A1, where they're going to actually start putting their own charging hubs in, whereas before they've always gone on someone else's location. So they're starting to look at their own land, but no own charging hubs in. That's good to see. But I think there definitely needs some catching up to do. I mean, the Ionities at Peterborough, which are quite close to me, there's 6 of them, and they're virtually always fully in use, and people are queuing for them. And certainly over the bank holiday, that was an issue. People were having to queue several hours to get a charger. And that's not sustainable. You need better. But there are two things working away from that. There's the first thing is new battery technology, and we are starting to see some really interesting new battery technologies come on. The salt batteries, the sulfur batteries, which do charge faster. There's obviously solid state batteries which have been coming for a long time, and eventually we will start to see some of those, I think, hit the actual market. They charge really quickly as well, comparatively. And the other thing is the density of these batteries are changing, so you can get a lot more kilowatt hours in a smaller, lighter battery. And if it's smaller and lighter, then you use less energy to move your car, so you potentially get more range that way. And that means you potentially have a smaller size of battery for the same power rate, same range as you currently get. So you could either look at it as saying, okay, well, we'll expand the range of using the current weights to 500 or 600 miles, or is it actually better that we just stick to the 250, 300 mile range, but have a battery which is smaller, which means, of course, it charges faster. So you could actually potentially have a battery which charges in 10, 15 minutes rather than the half an hour to 40 minutes that they take now. And that would have a big impact on 12 times on the chargers. So there's a lot going on at the moment. So certainly a lot going on at Fully Charged. I know we had Dan on the other week talking about it. And, he was right. There was a lot happening there. A couple of big car launches from Chinese manufacturers, which is definitely the people who are dominating the EV world at the moment. It's really interesting, actually, when you look at that from the legacy car manufacturer's point of view. Because if you look at the money which is being made, particularly by the German motor makers, their main target audience was China. That's where more cars were being bought, because car sales had been dropping off in Europe for many years, whereas the boom market was China. And now the Chinese market is completely dominated by Chinese manufacturers. And they're starting now to say, okay, we're producing all these cars. Shall we try and penetrate into the European market? And they are doing extremely well in Europe. One of the companies there, BYD, Build Your Dream, who started off as a battery manufacturer and have got some very clever battery technology. One of the particular clever things about their battery technology is it's actually quite good in winter. It doesn't have the same degradation in cold weather as some of the other batteries do. And they launched a new small sector car, sort of like, I guess you'd say, sort of like Ford Fiesta size, called the BYD Dolphin. I suspect that's going to be a competitor for the MG4 you looked at, Richard.
Yeah.
Very nice car. Very clever stuff. There's some real attitude gimmick in there. It's got a screen which you can voice control to go from landscape to portrait, depending what your preference is. But some nice navigation stuff and nice to drive, very comfortable, and quite well, certainly very well equipped. It felt quite luxurious inside. Certainly very well built, and they have really taken over the Norwegian market. They've really they've come in quite aggressive on pricing out there, and the Norwegian market being the biggest EV market in the world at the moment. So there's certainly stuff there. Then you've got GWM, who we've spoken about last year, who had launched the Aura Cat last year. They've launched the Aura to yet to be named, because it's called the Aura Lightning in China, but I think someone's got the Lightning. I think Ford may have the Lightning trademark outside of China, so they can't call it that. So Aura yet to be named, which is a very much if you look at the styling of it, it's a fastback, but it looks like an old Porsche. It's got quite a nice look like that, and that's incredibly luxurious. Really, really sort of the sort of thing you'd expect from a Rolls or something in terms of the interior quality. And that's the way the market's going. These newcomer companies will definitely be pushing their boundaries on it. And they had the Polestar 3 being shown as well in its format, and then quite a few other really interesting cars. There's one from Italy called I can't even pronounce it. It's AEHRA. I think it's Era, something like Era, something like that. But that's an incredibly jelly mold styled car. It looks very futuristic, and that's going to be in the top end luxury market. It's sort of 150k, but very fast, really quick, and very aerodynamic. And that's something we're definitely seeing. There's a lot of fastbacks starting to come out as well, because the aerodynamics of them are very good for EVs and long range. And then for the charge, there was a whole load of home chargers, and people like Owen were there, and other people as well, and showing off their wares, and lots of street charging solutions. Some of the ones I've spoken to before, like eGalley, who got through the street stuff and that. So really interesting. But the couple of the main announcements there were this formation of the Charge UK thing, which I think is really good, because it does allow them to pressure as a quad group body rather than individual ones.
That is definitely the issue. Is infrastructure, definitely. It's becoming a real.
And they've got the investment to put these chargers out. They're just
looking at EVs, so it's like it's. But the more EV drivers are out there, then the more pressure to put on the.
It is. We've got. I mean. I often said this a year or so ago. Us EV drivers were in the golden age, because we had enough chargers out there. The chargers networks had expanded, and it wasn't that costly, and there weren't that many EV drivers around. So we used to find chargers pretty easily, to be honest. And that won't be the case for a few more years now, because it's going to take a while for the infrastructure to catch back up with the sales. And that is partly because it's been very difficult to install chargers. You get two problems. You get the planning permission side of things, which is always a challenge, and then you get the actual problem of actually getting power in, which can take ages. I mean, it's not so much of a problem now. To be fair, the DNOs, the distribution operators for the power grid, have started to get power into these chargers a bit quicker now than they used to be. But you could, at one point, you could see chargers going in the ground, and then they'd wait a year and a half before they were connected up to the mains. That doesn't seem to happen quite so much now, but that was definitely an issue.
That's happening at the end of my road. That's actually what's happening to the BP garage. It's two CCA chargers in there, not turned on now for 6 months, but they're there.
Yeah. And some charger operators seem to be able to navigate this better in terms of getting their power on than others. I mean, there's been 2 Instavolts installed down the road from me at the little shopping centre we got there, and they were installed one day and they were connected up to power the next day. So it depends who you are. I think you can get your contacts in place and get things moving. But definitely interesting. But yeah, so it was an interesting weekend in that respect. And then completely flipping the switch, I spent Saturday morning at Aston Martin's Heritage Centre in Milton Keynes, which is well worth a visit if you ever get a chance to go there. Spent some time in the Q garage.
Of course, yeah.
Seeing the DB9 DB5's being made, and DB5 is quite interesting because that's actually is sold as a James Bond replica car. I think it's 230 or something like that. I don't know, I can't remember the exact figure, but they actually come with bulletproof screens, and they are genuinely bulletproof. That pop up screen at the back. You get a smoke generator. You get a water depositor. You can't deposit oil because that would be kind of illegal. And it has fake machine guns which come out the lights. and you do get the spinning license plates if you've got a few million to spare to buy one of these.
Oh, the bulletproof is when Richard needs when he's done some of his reviews for people. Just when you're doing
what was really
Microsoft.
interesting about that is they are still hand hammering them out of aluminium on formed molds. And they were saying that when they used to use the formed molds back in the 60s and 70s, the formed molds were hand carved originally, and they weren't particularly accurate. So some of the molds would be sort of a few centimeters longer on one side than the other. So it was quite often the case that a whole run of say DB9s or 5s would go out with one half longer than one side, longer than the other side. It was just the way they were built.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, headlights and things not being quite lined up and stuff.
Yeah.
Handmade.
But definitely handmade, and they still are, and that's a real skill. When you see people hammering out,
they let you drive any of them?
No. I mean, I think that they must be insured for a few million. I mean, I was certainly in a room with several £1 million worth of cars. It was interesting to say the least.
Yeah, these heritage places sometimes, they are. You can't even add him up, because I went to McLaren and there's Senna's car that he won the championship in. What value do you put on some of these? Some of these cars, you
can't. I mean, well, they say you can't put value on, but you can, because they actually do sell the cars out of the heritage centres. So that they have price tags, and there were a couple in there like £2 million or under that, half a million. So. Some of them in really interesting condition. There was one which was like covered in dust and dirt. It was a barn find, basically. And they were leaving it like that because it was just rising in value. And as soon as you start touching it, then you might decrease the value. So
Gary's trading his EV in for an classic Aston Martin.
What was actually very interesting talking about EVs there is that they do have a retrofit program. So if you've got a DB9, DB5, whatever classic Aston Martin, you can ask them to replace the petrol engine with a battery, a BEV. They'll give you your motor out of the car. You can have it as a coffee table. and they will put it back in at any time to restore it to its original state, but you can then run it around as an EV.
I'm not sure about that as a thing, to be honest. It's kind of classic cars being electrified, unless the drivetrain's worn out. I'd be very loath to do that.
Yeah, I think I would as well. And I think that's actually where, because I don't believe synthetic fuels are a future for anything realistically, because they're just too expensive to produce and too difficult to ship and that. But for classic cars and for motorsport, I can see a place for synthetic fuels for that.
Niche use cases, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah. It's definitely niche cases, but very, very interesting to do that, and to go from the one to the other.
Did you tell the gang at fully charged you were at Aston Martin, or did you keep that quiet?
Oh no, I told people I was going there. I mean, because Aston have got quite a big reputation because of this EV substitution thing they'll do. So they're not seen as totally bad people, and they have been looking at. They did can one of their electrification projects, but they are now looking at another battery electric vehicle at some point in the near future.
Well, they do have a hybrid, don't they? The Valkyrie track day car.
Valkyrie, yeah.
So it's £7 million a car, and probably but it's not really hybrid, as in you're driving around, and it's like Formula One style engine, isn't it? Hybrid.
Yeah, I mean, what's crazy if you look at the performance figures on some of these Astons, my car was pretty close to them in terms of performance. And the GT version of one would be, which is probably why, if you've seen some of the shots I took, the police have actually now using EV6s, my car, as pursuit vehicles, and also for armed response. The British Transport Police Armed Response Unit is going to be using a EV6 GT potentially. And I'm hoping in a few weeks' time we might actually get an invite to go and visit the police. We get summons to the station to show around all their EVs and to talk about why they're going that way.
Not the first time Gary's been summoned to the station from a misspent huge. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? How you see the is it German police put pictures and of Porsches and things like that, but I always think the British police have a nice Morris Minor.
Well, or Fiesta. That's the
Fiesta,
common one.
I mean, that's the thing. You talked about those Chinese brands. We're looking at Kim's always had Fiestas for years, and she was thinking about getting another one, but there's stuff I'm making them, but there isn't like an EV version of it to either. So it was like, well, just forget them completely now. So it's
the Volkswagen ID2 would spring to mind as a mainstream alternative. That's kind of like Polo size, I think.
I just don't understand. I mean, I'm sure there's some good logic to it, but when you've got a brand like the Fiesta that sells well, why not? Why not make an electric version and just convert people from the petrol cars to the electric ones? But they just seemed not bothered, or I'm not really sure.
I mean, I was always vaguely surprised when Volkswagen, instead of doing developing the electric Golf, they dropped it all for a whole new floor plan and called it an ID3, even though it was technically still a Golf, looked like a Golf. But these brands, I mean, I presume it's because they don't want them to be associated with the past. I mean, I can't imagine why, because it's it's, as you say, that form factor, that Fiesta form factor, the Golf form factor is always going to be required.
Yeah,
and those brands are very strong, but maybe it's the associations, perhaps, I don't know.
But this is where people like BYD can find their niche, because they're producing cars of that size.
Exactly.
Which a lot of the other car manufacturers, they've gone top end. They're trying to make premium markups on premium sort of designs at 60k and 70k, and there's only a limited market for that level. You want the 25k, 30k vehicles out there.
And that in a nutshell is why basically I bought a Kia in the end, because it just couldn't justify the sheer expense of going down a mainstream, or what I would call a legacy manufacturer like Volkswagen or Audi. I just couldn't justify the incredible cost compared to their petrol engine versions. It just seemed to be a huge markup. So it
seems to be that.
I mean, I think maybe we are due for a fairly major shakeout now, because as you say, Gary, China has been making these things for a long time, and they're, a lot of the Chinese manufacturers are really, really good, really good.
Yeah, and a lot of them have been working very closely with the legacy car manufacturers. I mean, I don't know if you looked when you were driving the MG, but if you look at a lot of the stamps on the parts, they're all VW stamps, because they've got the close association with VW.
I mean, if I was a cynic, which I'm not, I'd have thought perhaps they've put the ID3 through a photocopy here, because it all felt like the same gear, the same kit. You say, I'm sure if I dug into the drivetrain, I'd have found very similar parts.
But it's I mean, that's actually, in this case, is all above board legal, because SAIC and VW a cross licensing program in place. So VW can use some of SAIC's battery technology, and VW and SAIC can use their switch gear and stuff. So that's why there is a lot of similarity. But people talk about quality, and a lot of people think about the MG current brand as not being a high quality vehicle, because it was for a few years it probably wasn't. But nowadays it is basically a VW on skin most of the time.
I mean, I've got to say, I mean, I would disagree fundamentally with anyone who thinks it's not high quality. It's to me, I actually found the MG a higher quality device to be inside than the ID3, which I would never thought I'd ever say a year ago. It just it felt, the plastics felt better, it just felt like and of course it was better equipped, and it was a lot cheaper. So I mean, the MG dealer network is nowhere near as mature as the Volkswagen's one at the moment.
But no, I mean, there's some very good dealers in the MG world. So some, as with all dealers, there's some poor ones as well. But that's an interesting thing, again, talking to people at the show, whether the dealer networks are a thing of the past, whether we'll have a lot more direct sales coming up at the next year.
I think a lot of that's going to come down to reliability, because at the moment, I mean, whenever the car had to go to the dealer, it's because it had mechanically broken down in some way, or it was due for service. Whereas with the EV, I'm not expecting it to be serviced anywhere near as much, and there's not an awful lot to go wrong with it mechanically. The electronics worries me a bit because there's an awful lot of electronics in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, the two things which go wrong with EVs normally, and they tend to go wrong within the first few months, are 12-volt battery management. That because the reliance on 12-volt batteries is still not brilliant. And I think that will go away. It's fairly good. And then the battery management system issues, which virtually all new EVs seem to have at some point in their development life. I mean, if you get a model which has been out for more than a year, you're not going to really have any issues with it. And I've seen I was talking to someone on the show at the weekend, and he was driving a Nissan Leaf. He was now on 205,000 miles on it.
That's quite impressive.
Yeah, you would just think you could do that on. I mean, a taxi driver, so he did a lot of Oxford journeys, but any petrol or diesel car, and this was without any major replacements happening. Got other brake pads, and he'd only changed his brake pads, I think, something like 150,000 miles because they'd only just worn up at that point. Yeah.
So, Ian, when's your big change going to happen?
Next year.
Next year.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And you will have a few things to choose from next year. There's some interesting new cars coming out.
Because
we might all pick up at a retro museum all in 3 EVs.
Yeah, possibly. Oh, yeah, because especially I think what we're probably going to do, because my wife really likes her Fiesta, is we're just going to keep that. And it's on a lease, and we'll just, a PCP type thing.
Yeah.
Is one payment, so we'll just keep that. Maybe run that into the ground and just keep that one for now that she'll have, and then we'll replace my with something else. I still like I quite like the idea of the MG, but it's a bit early to do anything yet. So, but in the summer, I think I'll start investigating options and see what the choices are. It's the initial purchase price puts me off a bit, but the MG is not that bad compared to a similar to what I'm paying now kind of thing for.
MG's not bad at all.
Yeah. So and that's where the brands like BMW and things which I've had in the past, or Audi, I kind of just discounting them because of their super high purchase price. So that they're losing out, aren't they? All these the, like you said, legacy manufacturers, they're going to get seriously undercut by these Chinese companies if they're not careful.
I really know, and it's not like in the old days where the quality was a joke. They are, I have to say, I'm so impressed with how good they are. It's a real shock system. I mean, even 5-10 years ago, I was buying cars, and there'd be the Far East manufacturers. It'd be a bit of a joke. It'd be tacky plastics and all of it iffy and wobbly. Whereas now it feels like it's hewn from granite as well, just the same as everything else is. It's a really good car.
Not that I'll ever live up to my my first car of my Morris Marina coupe. So
glamorous. My first car was a 1972 Mini Clubman, which I later discovered the previous owner had managed to repair the front mainly with filler, and the back had been repaired with newspaper. Which I found out. I found the front after an accident, and the back I found out when it failed an MOT catastrophically.
Plastic padding, that was the thing I used to fill my Marina with.
It was you. It was you who did it.
I had an Austin 1100, which didn't last very long as my very first car. So that literally fell apart on me.
So whatever you get nowadays, they've come a long way since those. So we'll see later in the year. My main criteria will be not to spend significantly more than I'm spending now. So that is
tricky, actually. I would say, of course, it depends how much you are spending now. But I'm aware of the fact that I've spent more on the Kia than I spent on the Tiguan. It's not significant, but it's more. But that's being offset by the fact I'm just not spending money on fuel. I mean, I plug it in at home. I charge it on public charges if I have to. And as yet, I haven't noticed any change in the monthly electricity bill at all.
Yeah, that's good.
And it costs about, to charge from empty, about £2 or £3. It's just
which is the thing, isn't it? I mean, I've just done the figures out for my 480 miles I did the weekend, and that cost me 36 quid, even with some public charging. I mean, I admit I did charge overnight in a couple of cases, so I was getting cheap rate, but
Although
Type
that's
2.
one thing I would say, I've got a very panicked phone call from my partner who she plugged the car into charge on a street on a street charger overnight, and she thought she was going to have to pay £49 for it. Of course, what it was doing the pre-authorized thing.
Yeah.
So pre-authorizing her, and of course she actually only paid about £7, but she was huge big panic about that. So no, it's fine. But
Actually, that is definitely something to watch. And probably my top tip for people is if a charger fails, plugging it back in again and trying again is probably not going to work. It's that point you need to phone up the operator, because otherwise they're going to charge you another pre-auth and another pre-auth every time you keep clicking that charger. And that can add up to the point where you can't then use that card for anything else, and you can then be stuck when you get to the next charger because you've got too much pre-auth on it. So chargers either work or they don't work normally. They don't. It's not normally a comms issue or anything like that. It's usually that it's just, if it doesn't work, it's probably not going to work.
And thus far, I'd say my experience with chargers has been we have found a few that weren't working, but it was clear that it was clear they were working, and there was always one working nearby, so there's been no problems at all. So it's been a great experience so far.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Well, I think that's just all we've got time for this week. So Gary, where can we find you on your channel?
You can find me EV Owner on YouTube, and there will be some content going up shortly. I did actually post one video on day one of the event, just to give people a flavour of what was going on. And I've got a load more content to put together. Just got to get around to editing it. I'm also about to do my 10,000 mile review of my EV6 as well, which has got a lot of interesting stuff, including my amazingly manic reverse when I was going down. Devon seems to be showing up a lot on the show today, but I was going down a country road in Devon, very narrow country road. I found myself with an Arctic coming the other way at me. I decided I'd better reverse out of the way, and I discovered that EVs reverse very quickly.
Excellent stuff. And Richard, you're on your Mastodon links or wherever you are.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Well,
and also driving around in my Kia Niro looking for a charge point.
Yeah, and don't forget to get in touch, Richard, if you do want the Vista. If you don't, I'll pre-install Vista for you.
Thank you. Very kind though. Thank you.
So you have to find me on Twitter at ISFixit. I will be posting about this, I'm sure, at some point. I've got some more Korg KARMA ones to come up with. We'll be back same time, same place next week. Oh, I just want to shout out to my lads as well. 21 on Saturday.
Oh, happy birthday!
Wow.
21,
that really teaches all of us.
Well, yeah, they were little babies when we first started doing this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely does ages. Yeah, so we'll be back same time, same place next week.
Maybe introduce the digital lifestyle show spiel.
Yeah. Right, well, I better get going. So we'll see you next week.
Okay.